began like a scene from a Hollywood thriller, but this was no fiction. Before dawn, under the gray skies of Tacoma, armored vehicles rolled silently through quiet neighborhoods. Flashbangs shattered the stillness, doors splintered, helicopters circled above, and within minutes, one of the most violent drug networks in the Pacific Northwest, run by the notorious Knockout Crips, was collapsing in real time. But how could an airport, the symbol of modern connectivity, become the bloodstream of America's deadliest narcotic? And what does this reveal about the fragility of national security in 2025, even under the iron directives of President Donald Trump's domestic crackdown? The operation that tore through Tacoma had been 18 months in the making. It began after a spike of fatal overdoses in Pierce County young victims, all poisoned by identical blue M30 tablets. Those pills federal labs later confirmed contained fentanyl sourced from the same supplier. Behind each overdose was a chain of greed stretching across states, linking cartel suppliers in Arizona with street enforcers in Washington. The pattern was unmistakable. The Knockout Crips weren't just a gang, they were the logistical arm of a transnational narcotics network. According to newly released federal briefings cited by Reuters and The Guardian, the group used SeaTac International Airport as its artery. Couriers, often women lured through social media, carried luggage filled with shrink-wrapped fentanyl and cash. Each trip was planned like a military operation. Perfumes soaked into the fabric to disguise chemical odor, tickets bought in cash to evade tracking, and encrypted messages gave precise flight times and handoff points. Homeland Security agents called it the most disciplined domestic trafficking pipeline ever mapped. Yet beneath the surface of this intricate smuggling machine lay something darker, a transformation of gang culture into organized insurgency. The Knockout Crips didn't merely sell drugs, they ruled territory, enforced loyalty through violence, and used American infrastructure as a weapon against its own citizens. Strategically, this network represents more than a law enforcement challenge. It's a new kind of hybrid warfare on US soil. As DW analysts note, fentanyl has become a geopolitical weapon, destabilizing communities faster than any foreign cyber attack could. The Trump administration's consequence-based Enforcement Directive treats such networks as combat entities, granting agencies broader powers to neutralize them like battlefield threats. Across the world, parallels emerge. In Ukraine, hybrid conflicts fuse crime, corruption, and war economies. In Israel and Iran, shadow networks trade weapons through proxies. In China, synthetic precursors used in fentanyl production flow through murky industrial channels that Western intelligence still struggles to shut down. America's domestic war on fentanyl is no longer just about addiction. It's a mirror of global confrontation, where power, profit, and poison converge. As the first agents breached Tacoma's safe houses, one question echoed through the command centers. If traffickers can turn airports into front lines, where does national security truly begin, and how far should freedom bend in the name of safety? At first glance, the plan seemed simple: innocent travelers, ordinary luggage, and no traces of violence. But inside those suitcases, wrapped in plastic and drenched in perfume, lay thousands of lethal blue tablets fentanyl pressed to resemble prescription pills. It was a perfect disguise for a perfect storm. Federal agents say the couriers, mostly women in their 20s, were handpicked from social media. They weren't hardened criminals. They were mothers, students, and part-time workers seduced by promises of easy money for weekend trips. Each was instructed to pack precisely measured narcotics board commercial flights from Phoenix to Seattle and hand the luggage to waiting drivers near SeaTac Airport. In less than a day, thousands of doses of synthetic poison could move across state lines hidden in plain sight. According to BBC reports, U.S. airports have increasingly become silent battlegrounds for narcotics enforcement, with over 2,000 fentanyl seizures recorded in 2025 alone. The Knockout Crips exploited a gap in that system. They operated like an airline of crime-tracking shipments through encrypted phones, timing deliveries to match real passenger schedules, and using fragrance chemicals to fool canine units. The FBI later discovered the operation's brilliance wasn't in its scale, but its invisibility. The couriers blended perfectly into the crowd. No suspicious tattoos, no gang symbols, no criminal records. They looked like tourists. They used the chaos of airports as camouflage, a Homeland Security official told Reuters. That was their genius and our nightmare. But beyond the smuggling mechanics lay a chilling reality: the couriers were expendable. Each time one was caught, another was recruited within hours. Recruiters promised to pay debts, fund surgeries, even cover tuition. The allure of survival became the weapon of manipulation, and in the end, most never saw the faces of the men they worked for. In the Trump administration's renewed anti-narcotics doctrine unveiled in 2025, airports are now classified as domestic critical zones. This designation gives federal agents expanded authority to conduct joint operations with ICE, DEA, and FBI task forces under national security statutes treating drug smuggling as a threat equivalent to terrorism. Defense News noted that this marks a strategic shift combating fentanyl not as crime but as an asymmetric attack on American sovereignty. Globally, this pattern mirrors similar networks. Ukrainian intelligence has traced drug routes financing paramilitary units in occupied zones. Israeli analysts report Hezbollah-linked smuggling through Beirut's airport intertwining crime with political power. In Asia, Chinese chemical producers continue to supply precursor compounds, prompting tense diplomatic exchanges between Washington and Beijing. Each front reveals the same truth: synthetic drugs have become the currency of destabilization. In Tacoma, that global equation played out on a human scale. Each courier carried not just powder, but a death toll. Every suitcase represented 10,000 potential overdoses. Every flight ticket, another family's tragedy waiting to happen. When agents later reviewed security footage, one question haunted them: how many times had these couriers passed unnoticed through terminals, smiling at security officers, their luggage ticking with silent death? And now that the veil has been lifted, can any airport in America still claim to be safe? At 4:15 a.m., the sky over Pierce County flashed white. Dozens of flashbangs erupted in near-perfect synchronization, shattering windows in sleep. Tactical teams in body armor poured into neighborhoods long ruled by fear. The command frequency crackled, all units green. Within minutes, the Knockout Crips empire was collapsing. It was the culmination of Operation Summer Heat, a national directive ordered under President Donald Trump's domestic enforcement policy, a campaign treating organized crime as a homeland security threat. According to Reuters and DW, over 100 officers from the FBI Homeland Security Investigations (DEA) and the South Sound Safe Streets Task Force struck simultaneously across Tacoma and Lakewood. Streets were sealed. Armored vehicles rolled through cul-de-sacs. The sound of battering rams echoed through the dawn. Inside one target house, agents found what months of surveillance had promised: stacks of fentanyl pills, methamphetamine, and cash bundled in vacuum-sealed bricks. Nearby children's toys sat beside loaded pistols. Each room told the same story: a family home converted into a narcotics command post. By sunrise, 15 suspects were in custody, including gang coordinators, couriers, and distributors. Prosecutors described it as a complete network removal. The statistics spoke for themselves: 2.6 kilograms of fentanyl, 6.8 kilograms of methamphetamine, 27 kilograms of marijuana, 23 firearms, and $111,000 in cash seized. But the real figure, according to The Guardian, was unquantifiable lives saved. Each gram of fentanyl intercepted could have killed hundreds. The raids weren't just about arrests, they were about restoration. For 2 years, East Tacoma's neighborhoods had lived under siege gunfire at night, overdoses by morning, silence by afternoon. When the convoys rolled out with suspects cuffed and evidence bagged, the applause from doorsteps was spontaneous. For once, a local resident told reporters the sirens meant safety. Strategically, this takedown showcased how U.S. law enforcement has evolved in 2025. Under Trump's consequence-based Enforcement Directive, interagency coordination now mirrors military joint operations. Intelligence from FBI wire rooms feeds directly into tactical mapping. Drone surveillance syncs with ATF ballistics data. Command centers simulate raid outcomes before the first door is breached. As Defense News reported, this new enforcement model is inspired by counter-terror doctrines used in Iraq and Afghanistan: precision, simultaneity, disruption. The goal isn't just to capture criminals, but to annihilate their logistics before they can recover. The Tacoma case became the blueprint. Globally, the timing resonates with similar crackdowns. In Ukraine, simultaneous drone strikes on Russian logistics hubs mirror this concept of multi-target disruption. In Israel, coordinated raids against Iranian proxy militias follow the same principle: eliminate the network, not just the operators. Even in China, anti-corruption sweeps mimic this model: rapid, surgical, data-driven. The United States has now brought that philosophy home. Yet amid the triumph lies the uneasy balance between power and privacy. To map Tacoma's network, agents intercepted thousands of private communications, tracked financial transactions, and monitored social media in real time. It worked, but at what cost to civil liberty? As the BBC noted, the line between surveillance for safety and surveillance for control grows thinner each year. Still, as the sun rose over the silent streets of Tacoma, few could deny what had been achieved. The streets were quiet, the dealers gone, the sky sky clear. For the first time in years, the city exhaled. But beneath that calm one question lingers like the echo of a flashbang. How much freedom is America willing to sacrifice to feel secure again? Behind the arrests, the story deepened and darkened. What investigators uncovered wasn't just a local drug ring, but a regional command node feeding an interstate narcotics empire. The knockout Crips had evolved into a hybrid network linking street gangs, cartel suppliers, and digital money launderers across 3 states. As the indictments were unsealed in Seattle, federal officials revealed that the Tacoma crew's main supplier operated out of Phoenix, an individual with documented cartel ties, according to The Guardian and Al Jazeera. Wiretaps obtained by the FBI's South Sound Task Force painted a chilling portrait. The gang used encrypted apps, rotating phone numbers, and burner devices that changed every week. Orders were coded as tickets or bags. The language was ordinary, yet deadly. One message read, 2 passengers tomorrow, 5 a.m. flight. It wasn't travel, it was trafficking. Agents soon realized this was no freelance operation. It was discipline, hierarchy, and terror. Those who disobeyed faced retribution. 2 seized firearms were linked to separate drive-by shootings in Pierce County. Ballistic forensics connected shell casings from earlier homicides to the same guns recovered in the raids. In Trump's America, that connection was decisive. The war on fentanyl had become a war on domestic insurgency, and the knockout Crips fit the profile. Federal prosecutors applied national security frameworks once reserved for counterterrorism, arguing that these gangs used organized violence to sustain transnational supply routes. The Justice Department called it the convergence of street crime and cartel warfare on U.S. soil. Strategically, this blurred the boundary between law enforcement and national defense. As DW reported, such operations now fall under OCDETF, the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force's network, a fusion of intelligence, financial tracking, and direct action. In this hybrid model, IRS agents trace money while DEA units coordinate with local SWAT teams. Every raid becomes a joint battlefield maneuver. Internationally, parallels multiply. Ukraine's defense ministry has warned that Russian criminal syndicates have infiltrated smuggling channels to finance war logistics. Israeli intelligence faces similar challenges with Iran-backed networks using narcotics to fund regional proxies. Meanwhile, Western analysts accuse Chinese suppliers of exporting chemical precursors critical to fentanyl production, fueling what Reuters describes as a silent trade war through chemistry. This global web transforms fentanyl from a public health issue into a geopolitical chess piece. For Washington, the stakes go beyond narcotics. They touch sovereignty, global credibility, and internal stability. Within Tacoma's underworld, those stakes manifested in blood. Witness intimidation was rampant. Community leaders recounted stories of neighbors, silenced families, displaced witnesses vanishing before court dates. A police source told BBC News it wasn't about drugs anymore. It was control. They ran the city like a shadow government. Yet even as the network fell, the ideology remained profit by fear, order through chaos. Law enforcement can seize the cash, the guns, the phones, but how do you dismantle the mindset that fuels them? Experts from Jane's Defense Weekly have begun referring to these criminal syndicates as asymmetric actors functioning like paramilitary entities within democratic borders. Their logistics mirror insurgent supply chains, and their adaptability rivals that of foreign intelligence units. And therein lies America's dilemma. When crime behaves like war, must justice fight like an army? While the raids made headlines for their intensity, the real war unfolded in silence inside financial databases, encrypted chat rooms, and the shadowed corridors of digital banking. What agents uncovered next revealed the economic heart of the knockout Crips empire, a money web as complex as any multinational corporation. According to Reuters and Al Jazeera, IRS criminal investigations and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service traced a labyrinth of wire transfers, prepaid debit cards, and shell businesses, funneling millions through Phoenix back to cartel brokers in Mexico. These weren't random cash drops. They were coordinated cycles of laundering structured to mimic legitimate small business transactions. Corner stores, auto repair shops, and fake logistics companies masked the movement of dirty money under clean paperwork. By cross-referencing financial ledgers seized during the Tacoma raids, analysts identified recurring deposits, identical amounts, same timing, same sender networks. In total, over $300,000 in suspected narcotics proceeds were frozen in less than 48 hours. Every dollar we seize, one federal agent told The Guardian, is a bullet they can't buy and a plane ticket they can't book. Under President Trump's consequence-based Enforcement Directive, this financial strike is not an afterthought, it's strategy. The administration's 2025 policy shift redefined the fight against domestic trafficking as an economic counterinsurgency prioritizing data warfare over street confrontation. The aim: dismantle the money and the empire collapses. As Defense News reports, the Tacoma takedown was among the first to fully integrate AI-driven analytics into criminal finance tracking. Using advanced algorithms originally designed for counter-terror operations, analysts mapped how narcotics revenue moved through the Federal Reserve System crypto wallets and shadow banking services. The technology detected anomalies invisible to human eyes, tiny deposits timed to avoid reporting thresholds, recurring purchases of prepaid cards, and blockchain transfers bouncing through Asia. The result was a financial kill chain. By the time agents broke down Tacoma's doors, their digital teams had already crippled the gang's revenue streams. Vehicles purchased with laundered cash were seized. Jewelry and electronics bought through proxy accounts were confiscated. In one case, investigators intercepted a courier at SeaTac carrying luxury watches worth $75,000 payment for a fentanyl shipment. Strategically, this operation marked a turning point for U.S. enforcement doctrine. As DW noted, America now treats criminal economies as strategic targets, no different from military supply lines. The border between justice and defense has blurred beyond recognition. Globally, this model echoes similar strategies abroad. Ukraine has used financial tracing to expose Russian proxy funding in occupied territories. Israel's Mossad has frozen millions linked to Iranian front companies. Even China's crackdown on underground finance networks mirrors this approach: control the currency and you control the war. But beneath the geopolitical triumph lies a human story. For years, Tacoma's poorest communities had been the battlefield. Children grew up beside stash houses, and families lived under the shadow of gunfire and addiction. Now, with the networks dismantled, a fragile calm has returned. Streets once haunted by dealers now echo with construction noise and children playing again. Yet the scars remain economic, emotional, generational. As the data teams logged their final seizures, one question lingered: can financial warfare save a nation already poisoned by its own demand? By the third sunrise after the raids, Tacoma had changed. The usual sound of gunfire that once punctuated its nights had vanished. The corners where dealers loitered were empty, replaced by patrol cars and cautious optimism. Federal officials called it a success story proof, said one Homeland Security spokesperson, that the system works when America fights as one. But as BBC and Reuters later noted, victories in the war on fentanyl are never permanent. The networks regenerate, the players evolve, the danger mutates. Within 48 hours, the corridors of East Tacoma, once a marketplace for death, were silent. Families emerged from behind locked doors. Community patrols walked streets that had been off limits for years. Local volunteers began repainting gang graffiti, erasing symbols of control. "It's the first time in a decade my kids can sleep without hearing sirens," one mother told The Guardian. But for law enforcement, the celebration was brief. They knew the void would soon attract new predators. President Trump, speaking from the White House, praised the operation as a model for consequence enforcement nationwide. His administration vowed to expand Operation Summer Heat to every major port and airport corridor in the country. Intelligence briefings confirmed new warrants were already being executed in Phoenix and Las Vegas cities, serving as hubs for counterfeit pill labs feeding the U.S. black market. As Al Jazeera reported, these labs press fentanyl into M30 tablets, nearly identical to pharmaceutical painkillers, each capable of killing in micrograms. But this isn't just America's war, it's part of a global convergence. In Eastern Europe, Ukraine faces smuggling routes that double as covert arms pipelines. In the Middle East, Israeli authorities intercept narcotics tied to Iranian proxy funding. And in Asia, China continues to face pressure over its export of chemical precursors compounds that form the backbone of synthetic opioids. Each region fights the same invisible war, the struggle to protect sovereignty from the economy of poison. For Washington, the Tacoma raids symbolize more than a law enforcement milestone, they are a statement of intent. The Justice Department described it as a prototype of intelligence-first policing, where AI surveillance and tactical operations merge into a unified weapon. Acting U.S. Attorney Teal Luthi Miller told reporters the real success isn't in arrests or seizures, it's in breaking the death economy that feeds on despair. Yet moral questions remain. Can an endless war against narcotics coexist with the ideals of freedom when the government wields surveillance powers broad enough to see into every message, every movement, and every transaction who protects the citizens from the protectors themselves? In Tacoma for now, there's relief. The blue pills are gone. The gunshots are fewer, but across America, fentanyl still flows shifting routes faster than enforcement can follow. The battle has only evolved from the streets to the servers, from the dealers to the data. And as the United States stands at the intersection of justice and liberty, one question defines the future in the fight to save lives. How much freedom will America surrender to protect itself from its own shadows? The Tacoma raids, led jointly by the FBI, Homeland Security, and local task forces, marked one of the largest fentanyl crackdowns in U.S. history. Over 18 months, agents mapped a sophisticated smuggling network controlled by the knockout Crips moving drugs through Sea-Tac Airport using unsuspecting couriers. The operation, executed under President Trump's consequence-based Enforcement Directive, dismantled a multi-state trafficking system and seized over 2.6 kilograms of fentanyl 23 weapons and $111,000 in cash. More than a police victory, the takedown redefined how America confronts transnational crime. The fusion of surveillance, AI analytics, and coordinated raids mirrored military precision, an approach hailed by Reuters, DW, and Defense News as the blueprint for future enforcement. Yet beneath the success lies unease, a nation balancing liberty against the need for control. The Tacoma operation may have silenced one network, but its legacy asks a deeper question: can the United States preserve its freedoms while waging an endless war against the machinery of addiction?